Welcome to Keep It Healthy. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Costas Fantis, an accomplished and innovative leader in the field of digital health and neurosurgery. Currently, he's the founder and CEO of Encode Health. Stay tuned as we explore Dr. Costas' journey, the fascinating healthcare industry challenges, and future directions of healthcare efficiency. Welcome to Keep IT Healthy podcast, the show hosted by people making things happen in technology, aiming to optimize healthcare delivery, health, well-being, and fitness. My name is Jan Kamiński and I'm the co-founder of AppLover, a company dedicated to improving the quality of life with IT solutions and digital advisory. We started making this podcast to amplify great thinking to propel healthcare forward.
I was known as the only medical student to own his own medical school, in quotation marks. It was a summer school for medical students. And one of the lectures was by Professor Tony Redmond. And this was the guy who traveled the world whenever there was an emergency needed. And he set up a lot of the emergency infrastructure in the UK from his base in Manchester. And he spoke about this one young girl who was in a Haiti earthquake, and she had a bilateral leg amputation from what we only could assume was a non-government organization, an NGO. But there was no surgeon to claim that they'd done the procedure, and there was no handover from one group to another. She was essentially just found in one of the community hospitals and then brought into one of the major hospitals during that unfortunate period. And I thought to myself, this would not have been acceptable in the UK, and this shouldn't be acceptable anywhere else in the world. It doesn't matter if it's an emergency scenario.
Right.
And I thought to myself, what would be the fastest way to create electronic records? And that's how I came up with the idea of Encode Health, along with all the other influences in my life up until that period. And what we do at Encode Health is very simple. It's an app, and you can scan in products into a very simple electronic health record, any kind of product, whether it's a surgical product, simply using the QR code or barcode that's associated with that product. And from that simple bit of information, we can provide dashboards to suppliers and also be able to forecast in the future what is needed for this particular healthcare provider. So that young girl who had a bilateral leg amputation, you could forecast for the needs of physiotherapy or medication and provide the dashboards to the suppliers.
So what's the most audacious problem that you're tackling right now? And how do you use this AI or any sort of ML behind it to enhance the product that you're building?
Inefficiency. I think that's the most audacious problem that we're tackling. We're tackling inefficiencies and a little bit of inaccuracy as well. So trying to streamline everything and taking out the boring admin side of things. And even though that doesn't sound sexy, we're trying to make it as sexy as possible and take out the hard work of mapping what is needed in a hospital and making sure that patients are cared for and their safety is of utmost number one criteria.
There are a lot of reasons why it's not working or why the inefficiency is there. So what are those?
For some of the hospitals, especially in the surgical departments of some of the hospitals, the admin team is working at about 50% capacity. Okay. And they're having a very tough time monitoring and making sure the products are coming in at an efficient manner. And so what tends to happen is they overbuy.
Right.
And these products are kept in storerooms and then they expire without them knowing. And so what tends to happen
Okay.
is those products are shipped out elsewhere, but there's a whole effort around bringing in too many products, some of those products being shipped back to the supplier, and then some of the products being discarded because they're out of date. That's one of the supply chain issues. The other is something that happens a lot in the UK is consignment products. Consignment products are where suppliers essentially place a lot of product unpaid for in the hospital, and then there is some effort required by the supply chain managers in hospitals and the representatives of the suppliers need to marry the information around stock usage. So it's essentially Excel spreadsheet, emailing back and forth, making sure that they're in agreement. Some of the stock goes missing, and so some of that capital expenditure that is used by the suppliers needs to be taken into account for. They're losing money, the hospital's losing money, and nobody really needs to lose this money if everything is more streamlined.
Could you explain how is it connected with electronic health records?
I tell you something about our electronic health records. It's only a very basic one. We don't really focus on it that much. The reason being is most hospitals have their own electronic health record system, and it is usually a lot more dynamic than the electronic health record system that we could provide. So we provide integrations with our system, and we have a calendar system as well. When a patient is booked in for a procedure, we can apply some algorithmic calculations to forecast what products, what inventory is needed within a week, within a month, within 2 months as well.
Could you explain that? How does that module works? What do you do in that space with the data, patient data probably, or the hospital data?
We're still in early development of this, and we have an in-house ethics team to make sure that we're doing this appropriately. And where possible, patients would be eligible to offer their information about an implant that is inserted into them. There's multiple reasons why this is important. So it's things like a cardiac implant that has a battery, and being able to understand what type of cardiac implant and what type of battery is inserted into a patient, where that patient is, whether it's a particular kind of batch number or lot number. Sometimes there's recalls around those products, and it needs to be very efficient. At the moment, the way that is handled is very inefficient. I don't know if you remember how before COVID, there was an issue with breast implants. There was the PIP breast implants, and they were known to rip and cause severe morbidity with female patients. But the problem was not only patients, but the doctors did not know whether these implants were PIP or not. As basic information as the brand. And right now, would you know, would your mother know, or would your grandmother know whether you had a Stryker or a Smith & Nephew hip implant or knee implant? This isn't often known. And if there is a recall around these kind of products, you wouldn't know. And it is very costly to look through all the records manually and find if your particular brand and lot number it needs to be recalled into the patient or removed. And this is only going to become more and more worse because more patients are living longer, which means they're having more implants placed into them because they can.
How far can we go back with or is it dependent on the hospital EHR to recover the data or to just check which, for example, we mentioned implants, so which one we have?
It depends on the country, it depends on the hospital, and it depends on the department. You have
Right.
to be very specific, and that's where we try and come in to be very specific, very contextual with the products that are being inserted into patients. And not only that, each country has its own registration system. So within the UK, for instance, there is a national implant, knee implant registry, and it's not updated 100%, but it's close to 100%. With neurosurgery, there's certain things called external ventricular drains, and there is a registry for this as well. However, that's less than 50% filled in.
Okay.
And
Okay. I get it.
that's just the UK. You can scale this and to the rest of the world. In the US, they have very similar problems as well.
At the AI summit in London, I saw that you highlighted some advancements, and some game changing advancements in a sense. And what's in your opinion most controversial or misunderstood innovation that you've encountered in a hospital or in healthcare in general, or you presented, and why do you think it's a game changer?
I think some of the more controversial innovations that we've spoken about has been to do with predictive analytics for hospital inventory management. Some people are skeptical about what we do, and especially
Why?
skeptical. Well, they're just skeptical about how AI can be applied and whether these algorithmic functions are appropriate enough and whether they're secure enough. And some people just worry that maybe big pharma or some of the larger medical suppliers will dominate the healthcare environment and create more monopolies and not be able to allow smaller but maybe even more safer products coming into the market.
Could you share a success story where, especially AI, but it doesn't necessarily have to be connected with AI. It can be, but at Encode Health, that had turned the tables for patient outcomes or healthcare efficiency that you mentioned, like something concrete and like real within this space.
I think it's interesting that we were able with aesthetic clinics to reduce 30% of their inventory costs. So driving on that success, we decreased their stock out incidents, reduced their inventory costs, and it allowed them to expand into different services because they saved money. And so not only did the client benefit, the clinic itself, but also the wider community because different services were being offered there as well.
Is it commercialized in a sense, like you're because you mentioned you're developing features, new features, you want to tackle new industries, I mean within healthcare obviously, or you currently you're under, let's say you're focusing on having the perfect market fit. What's the strategy?
Yeah, so we've got a product that's been validated by one of the larger hospitals in the UK, and now we're developing a particular feature that we feel we need to complete before we reach out to a variety of other hospitals within the UK. At the moment, within the
Okay.
UK, we've got 4 engagements, and we're not commercializing those engagements at the moment. We want to
Okay.
crystallize the product first, make it as secure as possible, and we've been lucky enough to win a UK Smart grant to be able to do this. It's one of the more prestigious grants that the UK offers. So once we complete that, we'll go and dominate the market.
When you were building a product, were you using any external, like fractional advisors, medical advisors, or you use your own network? How did you try to master the market fit, and whom did you ask for advice while doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So before we even started, I've been lucky enough to be exposed to a very wide network, not only with medical device corporates, but also senior C-suite executives in hospitals, and also just the normal admin person. Call them normal, but the admin person in hospitals as well, and being able to bring all of that information in together, along with the inspiration from Professor Tony Redmond. It just seemed like a natural fit to create a platform like Encode Health. We're still early stages, we're still being cautious around some of the functionality that we're developing. We've engaged with some of the largest medical device corporates to make sure that their pain point is being solved as well, and trying to make what we have a win-win for everybody, including the patient.
And also, you mentioned that at the beginning. I mean, you mentioned the ethical aspects of healthcare, and I know that. I mean, from the content I see on the summit, and I mean, you've been pretty vocal about the ethical minefields of AI in healthcare. So, could you share a situation that you had to make a tough ethical decision in that sense, and how did you navigate it?
Um, yeah, so there's quite a few things that we look at internally, but there are some products that we think about developing, and if we feel that there may be a breach in a patient's ethics, or it might compromise patient security, then even if there's a small chance of that happening, we tend to drop that feature.
You mentioned some of them, but what are the plans currently? I mean, what's the next step for the company?
I think that's interesting, and I kind of touched upon it before, is being able to engage in personalization of healthcare. More and more people are living longer. More and more healthcare products are being used on patients, and being able to assist in ensuring that those products are being consumed and being implanted in a safer way, potentially have more warnings or around those products before they're even inserted into a patient.
By personalization, do you mean this trend of digital therapy, digital companionship, or something else?
I can talk about some of my research in neurosurgery. Um,
Okay.
so so the way that tumors are classified now in neurosurgery has changed. Before, you used to look at it under the microscope. Oh, and there's these strange shapes, and you'd say, oh, that's a glioblastoma, or that's an astrocytoma. Okay, now it's gone beyond that. Each tumor has its own DNA structure. And so we need to provide therapeutics that are specific to the molecular diagnostics of each tumor or each patient. And that's the direction in which we're going. We want to personalize it down to the molecular level.
I get that. You have those two questions that we always ask our guests, and one is about advice for other founders, especially in the healthcare or health tech space. So, like, if you were to build this again, what would you do differently?
I'm so sorry. My phone's ringing. I can't answer the question. The answer to that specific question has got to do with making sure that there's enough of a market for what you want to do. I'll tell you a little bit more of the specifics in healthcare. In healthcare at the moment, any product, well, some of the bigger products, some of the bigger companies that went on to do an IPO, they have subsequently either lost anywhere from 50% to nearly 95% of their value. Make sure that your product is safe. Make sure that your product has a good market fit, and make sure that there's longevity for you to be able to finance your team. Don't grow too fast and then not be able to secure bring your team throughout the development. But that's easily said than done. That's very easily said than done. And I think a lot of companies need to make tough decisions sometimes.
Especially this year. I wanted to ask you also about the trends. You mentioned some, like personalization in healthcare, AI, but like what other trends do you see coming, or do you see that are growing so fast?
Yeah, I think I mentioned one around personalization of healthcare, to do with being very specific about the therapeutics with different types of tumors. I think the other area that's interesting is the use of AI, not only to find those particular therapeutics, but also AI to diagnose. So I know from my research that I've done that AI is being used to diagnose tumors at a molecular level using scanning techniques. Now, what do I mean by this? At the moment, if you have an MRI scan, there's a radiologist or a radiographer that looks at the scan, the imagery, and they say, okay, so this is glioblastoma. Okay, great. But further than that, what molecular diagnostics are associated with that particular glioblastoma? Is it a wild type? Down to the molecular level.
Right.
Using AI, you can potentially tell whether that particular glioblastoma has a wild type molecular diagnosis. They're doing a lot of this research in China. In fact, China are doing close to 60% of this type of research. At the moment, the Western world still uses biopsies and looking under the microscope to be able to diagnose those particular types of tumors.
In order to make it happen, do we need more doctors with a tech knowledge, or do we need more engineers and tech people with medical knowledge? What do you think? Which is the way, in your opinion?
Okay, so it's not one thing. Okay, I think the most sustainable way of doing this is having groups of blended disciplines, multidisciplinary teams. In healthcare in general, we're quite used to this. In the tech world, I think we're getting used to it more and more now. So being able to work with healthcare providers and people who are engineers within AI, being able to blend those skills together is something that's new and will come more and more into the future to help drive healthcare forward and make it
Right.
more personalized.
And what's different in Africa, for example?
Okay, so the product, so before it even reaches a hospital, it sometimes doesn't reach the hospital, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. You're operating on the UK market, but are you present in any other as well, or it's mainly UK currently?
We've got our eyes on the European market and the US market. Those are the two main markets that we're looking at. However, we've got some interesting developments in the pipeline associated with 6 African nations. It's still very early stage, so I don't want to disclose too much, but there are some efficiencies from the manufacturer all the way up until the point at which the products are given to the patients or the people. And what I mean by inefficiencies is that supply chain is disrupted for lots of different reasons. And the mantra that we kind of abide by is matching clinical demand with medical supply and kind of making sure that the integrity of that supply chain is kept.
Right. And I mean, if someone would like to invite you for the journey or contact you, where can we find where you're most active? On LinkedIn, or where is it?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn as Dr. Cos Fantis, COSFANTIS. You can email me at cosfantis@encodehealth.com. I think those are the two main areas that you'll get me.
We'll provide the links in the description. Because thank you so much for appearing today.
Thank you, Jan.
Stay in touch with us. Subscribe to our podcast, give us a like, comment, or share. If you want to reach out personally, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram.